to Mr. Mykhailo Savva, an expert of the Center of Civilian Liberties. Hello, dear friends. We would like to discuss a very painful topic about kidnapping Ukrainian citizens by Russian occupation forces. The citizens of Ukraine are being held in captivity at the territory of the Russian Federation, and we will discuss it in more detail. But now I would like to stress that these people are not combatants and not directly involved in warfare. However, they are deprived from freedom. Their status for the Russian Federation is the same as the prisoner of war. So the response from the police of the Russian Federation is that the person was detained for counteraction to special military operation. That's the formulation which is used by the Russian Federation for prisoners of war. According to the international humanitarian law, civilian citizens detained on occupied territories must be freed without any preconditions, because there is no subject matter leading to their detention. For example, a lot of people were kidnapped by Russians from the Kiev region, Sumy, Chernihiv regions, where there is no warfare. So according to the international humanitarian law, they must be released. However, they're not released. And today, Victoria Masha, a teacher from Chernihiv region, was freed. She was detained back in March, and Yana Mayboroda, who was detained in Kiev region, and also 4 Marines. And this is a good start for a large-scale process where the state of Ukraine, the government, should cooperate with our civil society. And today in our audience there are representatives of NGOs and my colleagues Anna Popova, project manager from the Center of Civil Liberties, Mr. Oleksandr Kononenko, representative of the Human Rights Plenipotentiary,
умовах, яка була затримана,
and the person who was a prisoner, Sergei Gorgolin, a prisoner of war. And we shall work as follows. Each speaker has 7 minutes, and I would like to give the first floor to Oksana Popova. It's the new product of the Center for Civil Liberties. She will present it. Then the floor will be given to Oleksandr and Sergei, and I will sum up.
запитання від
And then the Q&A session for the press. And I'm pleased to give the floor to my colleague. I'm glad to welcome you at this session, and I'm happy that the Center for Civil Liberties managed to implement this project. We have created an interactive map of forced kidnapping, and you can open the QR code and you will see the map live, and you can enhance it and see each particular case. The idea of this map was born because a lot of opinion leaders were kidnapped from local communities, and this map was created based on the feedback from local communities, and it was decided to make a focus on this category. These are human rights activists, self-governance representatives, and why we decided to focus on this category, because representatives of self-governance is a significant category of the captives. They make up 91 cases, and 15 among them are women. The occupants have access to local budgets, to secret premises, subordinated to local authorities, and due to the Ukrainian civil society, we are aware that those self-governance representatives are respected by the local communities. Today we have documented 15 cases of kidnapping of religious activists and chaplains, and we would like to stress that these are not military religious servants. These are people working, providing religious service in small boroughs. A lot of kidnapping was conducted early in the morning when people are not ready, and they are caught by surprise. A lot of activists were kidnapped. The Center for Civil Liberties and the colleagues in the Tribunal Coalition have documented 26 cases of kidnapping, among them 6 women. And in particular during public protests in Melitopol, in Kherson region, which is an evidence of aggressive action of the occupant. Separately, I would like to stress on the fate of journalists and media activists. This is one of the most important opinion-leading categories in the society, and unfortunately, we are not aware of the fate of our colleague from Union, Dmytro Khvelyuk. His father was released, luckily.
Масової інформації.
Representatives of the media described what was going on from the side of occupants in the media and also in personal communication. So this is a really valuable category of people
І боротися.
whom we have to get released.
Об'єднання журналістів, вони дуже
I know that the colleagues from journalist unions are working very hard on that. Also, I wanted to stress that in Kherson region there were a lot of forceful kidnappings because people were not willing to go to captivity. And we have information about the release of 250 persons. And the Center for Civil Liberties, together with Tribunal, have documented 681 cases. 250 were released, 11 were killed. And one of them was the journalist Maxim Levin at the beginning of March. So Russia is fighting with opinion leaders in their own country and now in ours. But the Ukrainian society is strong, and such materials as our map are available online, and we can inform the world about the fate of our people. This map is interactive, and we are amending it with the information about the people who have been released, and you can inform about those kidnappings if you are aware of any in any region, irrespective of the circumstances and category. And we have a contact center where you can receive information, where to address, and they can help you with filling in the documents. Our team is working hard on that, and when we make it public, it's easier to provide advocacy for the international community to release Ukrainians. And today I would like to state that the release of 2 civilians was significant for our country. Thank you, Ganna. Oleksandr, the floor is yours. Hello, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity, because the topic of civilians who are in captivity, this topic is extremely important and has gained a significant momentum. And I wanted to remind you that starting from 2014, a lot of civilians have been held at the territory of the Russian Federation. A lot of political prisoners have been given a significant term in prison. Starting from this year, the Plenipotentiary's Secretariat received about 9,000 cases of disappearance of civilians, and 2,241 persons were found, 44 were released, 97 were killed. So, and over 100 were fixed by the Red Cross, International Red Cross Committee, and the Russian side is constantly breaching the conventions number 3 and 4, both on the soldiers and civilians, and they are putting them on par with prisoners of war. So the categories like former anti-terrorist operation members or law enforcement officers are included into the prisoner of war category. And the society must give special attention to this and not leave this question untouched. An expert council under the Plenipotentiary on Human Rights will be created. It was launched yesterday, and it was an introductory session. And today, the Secretariat will publish its respective information on its website, inviting representatives of civil society organizations, and probably provide their recommendations to agree on cooperation. And today there will be the announcement, and in 10 days we will have this expert council. We would also like to ask people at the temporarily occupied territories. They often wonder how to inform about the people kidnapped. First of all, they need to inform the national police about disappearance online or send an email. After that, the application will be registered and entered into the unified case register, and the citizen will receive feedback. If this mechanism is not functioning, please feel free to inform the Secretariat on failure to conduct specific actions. But at present, this mechanism is functioning very good, and there is communication with the national police. And I wanted to also say that the Secretariat has developed a roadmap what to do in the case of disappearance of a civilian. Some regions were temporarily occupied or were a theater of war, and we have established cooperation with the military civilian administrations of the regions, Kiev, Chernigiv, and Sumy, Kharkiv, Donetsk, Lugansk, and Mykolaiv, Odessa, and Kherson regions. And we have also addressed the Zhytomyr region, military and civilian administration. These are the regions having suffered from the so-called military forces of the Russian Federation. Why so-called? Because like yesterday, you could have seen a publication on the national channel by the national police about atrocities in Bucha. These were bandits who were just murdering people, civilians trying to leave this area. And we applied to international organizations like the International Committee of Red Cross and United Nations on increasing the pressure and returning to homeland of those prisoners being civilians, and moreover, people who are pro-Ukrainian and are a threat to the occupation regime and their quasi self-government, they suffer most. They are arrested, tortured, and we have seen that all in, for example, Kharkiv region. Thank you, the organizers, for this opportunity. For raising the awareness on this problematic aspect. And the next floor goes to the person who has been in captivity. Thank you. My name is Gorgol Sergey. I'm from the village of Kozarovichi, Vyshgorod district of the Kiev region.
У Київське водосховище, і тому нашими бійцями було прийнято
Our village is on the shore of the Kiev, the so-called Kiev Sea, Kiev Water Deposit. We were trying to contain the enemy and to blow up the dam. So the occupants appeared on the 26th of February, and the first was the avant-garde and then the main bulk of them, and they were squeezed between the natural thresholds and Bucha, where they would meet opposition, and they have suffered significant losses, and in a couple of days they started hiding in a residential area and shooting at our people from in between the civilian houses. But this was not efficient, and in a while they were targeted and killed. And when I was taken captive, it was the 29th of March. They suffered several blows to the ammunition storage, and they were quite mad, and they lost a helicopter. That's why their supervisors started searching for people correcting the fire.
у Гостомелі.
But on that day, I was trying to receive humanitarian
Отримати, а замість
assistance, and I was ambushed. I was detained without any obvious reason, and after a short interrogation, my hands were tied, my eyes and ears were covered with tape, and I was put into a small room by 1.5 meters, and there were 11 persons. So there were a lot of residents from our village, but there were also others from other villages. And on the 5th of March, there were some people who have been there for 6 days. On our question, what's our status? We were told that we are temporarily detained and we're not prisoners of war, and the convention is not applying to us. We were fed very poorly because they had disruptions in food supply, and we have heard about the problems in relations between the occupiers themselves. For example, in Katyuzhanka, on the north of Dimir, there were Kadyrov Chechen regiments who were like enjoying life and roasting a lamb. But those who caught us, they were deprived of supplies. And we were given 1 piece of bread per day.
декілька інтерв'ю.
Then we were brought to Viknaland plant. And those who have heard the TV presentation, they know what it's about. We were kept there, poorly fed, but a bit better, and there were more of us, and we were given 2-3 rations for up to 2 days for 26 people. We didn't have any conditions. We were tied and we were lying on the concrete floor, and we had only water. Because water in abundance, because the owner made a significant supply of water, and even the occupants used this water because they saw that we are okay and they were afraid of being poisoned. The compressor section was in an open hangar, and it was freezing. Everybody was sick, and the youngest one was 19, sorry, and the oldest one was over 75. For example, Vasil and Dmitro Nakhiluk, a journalist from Union, they were held separately, and each one of them was told that the other was released. And they learned they were together only there. The occupants were pressuring psychologically rather than physically. There were cases when people were beaten, but these were rather exceptions. The people who, on their opinion, had some access to information, for example, truck drivers, or people who had Russian forces on their phones, so took some pictures or videos. And they tended to exaggerate the so-called guilt. For example, they detained a man going from Havrilovka to Glibivka to their relative, and his wife and child were left in the car, and he was dragged there. And it was presumed that he sent somewhere the location of their posts. And then they alleged that he was correcting Zenit rocket complex S-300, so Sedana complex. We had our eyes covered, so we were not aware about the time. But we heard the generator, and we presumed that it was launched in the morning and stopped in the evening. And from time to time, cargo vehicles approached our place of captivity, and engines were launched, and the exhaust gas was going to our premises. We also had cases when they were abusing captives. One of them had videos and photos in the phone, and he said that it's not his phone, he took it from some kid, and that pissed them off. And they said that this bastard stole a phone from a child, and you can do whatever you want with him. But people were scared, and they did not touch him. At first, there was some hope. Every day there was an interrogation. We were promised that we are going to be released, and there was like constant promise, like the car broke, we are going to release you tomorrow, but we were desperate. And it was very frustrating. We were not afraid that we are going to be killed. It was just not comfortable to be there in such helpless position.
Потім, уже коли
Then, when they understood that they cannot get any useful information from us, it was the 10th of March. Some people were segmented away and taken in some unknown direction. Яровий Oleksandr, Микола Хвилюк, and the others, we do not know where they are. Also, there were cases when those who refused to cooperate Vadim Kubrak, my neighbor, was a hydraulic engineer at the local hydraulic station, and the station was one of the points in our defense. They had a lot of questions, and he refused to cooperate, and they were beating him heavily on the head, on the hands, so most of his fingers are not functioning, and he was bleeding. They had to bandage him, and they understood that they were overdoing it. And like every day, it was tomorrow and tomorrow. And on the 11th of May, 11th of March, and the curator from FSB, it was obvious that he is not a military man, and he said, like, we're going to bring you a document that you are not cooperating with the armed forces of Ukraine, and you're going to cooperate with the Russian army. If you, after that, contact the armed forces of Ukraine, so if ours do not find you, yours are going to take care of you, like the security service. And people with machine guns were standing at the exit, so we understood that we cannot get out otherwise. And we knew they were serious because they once imitated murder, and in the other case they shot a person because there were photos of Russian vehicles in his phone. We were released on the 12th of March, and we were told that we are brought to the edge of Dymer, and the next village, Katyuzhanka, was occupied by Kadyrov forces, and we were afraid to be kidnapped once again, and we were sure this one will look like a spa when we get there. When we were going back, a couple of armed patrols stopped us, and we had to go over them, and we knew that they were all over the place, so we were risking very much when we were going through. So that's basically it. Thank you, Sergey. would much like this to never repeat in Ukraine. And to sum it up, in the database of the Center for Civil Liberties, there are 671 persons. Eleven persons, unfortunately, have been proven dead. 250 have been released. This is Mr. Serhi's story. And 410 people are in captivity at the occupied territories or in Russia. The infographics obviously shows that the key objective when they capture, the occupants capture civilian Ukrainians, is to ruin the resistance potential. There is a person, there is a problem. So they try to isolate the people who could ignite the resistance. So resistance centers. Another objective would not be logical because it's not for exchange, because civilians are not frequently exchanged. So the only obvious objective is to deprive the Ukrainian society of the potential for resistance. We have a regional statistic breakdown here, and you can see the detention place breakdown. So 50% is at home. So the occupation authorities were going to specific people. This is a substantiation of the fact that this unlawful detention was to reduce the potential for resistance. And a couple of words on what comes next. This information is not just interesting, and it is important for us because it shows us what to do next. We have already discovered 24 places in Russia and in the annexed Crimea. This is not including occupied territories of Ukraine, where civilian Ukrainians are held in captivity, from Belgorod to Krasnoyarsky Krai. That's a region of Russia. They are kept in prisons, in colonies, and in particular, there is a case in one of the imprisonment institutions. There are women, and Ukrainians are always separated in a segment of, for example, pre-trial detention unit. And they are guarded by the military police of the Russian Federation. So they are held like prisoners of war. If it's a colony, it's a separate location. For example, a strict detention facility with separate guard unit to put them into informational vacuum. They don't have information from outside. And they are very limited in information. And now it's important to understand in which detention, they are being held, because after that there is a very complicated piece of work on protecting their rights. And our key objective is not to exchange those people, but to force the Russian Federation to release them, because they are obliged to do so. And we need to ensure their survival, because the places where they're being kept obviously have facts of torture, and they are made sing the anthem of the Russian Federation, and their inhuman conditions. And this must be stopped. And in cooperation with our international partners, and also through direct action applied to the Russian government and specific facility supervisors, detention facility supervisors. Thank you, and please, your questions. Dear friends, please feel free to raise your hand to ask your questions. While the guests are thinking about their questions, I would like to go back to this slide, because it crowns the work of our entire team. And thank you, Mykhailo, for stressing that. So this is the first information in open, let's say, in the internet, on the places where people were kidnapped. We questioned all our contacts also on Facebook, analyzed open data, verified several times, and used websites, Telegram publications, comments, in order to verify this information. And you can see that 50% of the people were kidnapped from their home, and usually early in the morning, or if people were going in the street and working as a volunteer, and 10% of the people were detained at block posts. And 12.7% were detained at work, and it mostly was the segment of representatives of self-government and representatives of guard services. Regarding protests, it's usually in the northern regions, and also in the bomb shelters in northern regions in February and March. A lot of people were detained, and the occupiers went into bomb shelters and killed everybody. And 2%, it's not a big percentage, but in fact, it's a huge quantity, because the people were seeking for shelter, and then they were kidnapped or worse. And 1% of proactive Ukrainians who were invited for prophylactic, let's say, discussion or interaction, and they never came home. So please provide your information if you have any valuable data. Hello, I'm Alina Matveychuk from the STB TV channel. What about efficiency in terms of getting back our civilian hostages? that's going back to the story that Mykhailo referred to. We can see that international institutions are seemingly ready to come there, but the Russian Federation does not admit any international organizations like the Red Cross to our civilians and prisoners of war. What other means are there for the international organizations to get through to our civilians and military held hostage in Russia? What other organizations can be involved? We as civilians, as journalists, can address other institutions and organizations. May I start, and my colleagues will add. In order to resolve this problem, we are addressing Russian human rights activists and lawyers who are risking their safety to help us. So, in order for the international organization to come somewhere, they have to know that Ukrainians are there. How do we receive this information? From the Russians. For example, a citizen of Russia went to his wife, kept in a colony. Then he writes to the human rights activists and informs them that they're Ukrainians. And I heard that they were forced to sing the anthem of the Russian Federation. So we are aware that there is such a location where our citizens are being held. In the Russian Federation, there is such an important system of organizations. The Public Monitoring Commission for the rights of human rights in detention. This is similar to the Ukrainian commission, but the Russians have more mandate, a bigger mandate. In the recent period, the members of this commission were replaced. Previously, they were activists, but in many cases, there are people who are ready to conduct inspections and to find citizens of Ukraine there. Now we need a more systemic cooperation with the Russian human rights activists.
Адвокатів, які принципово хочуть зараз допомагати. Тобто,
there is a big group of Russian lawyers who are willing to help.
вони звинувачують вже.
And there are cases when Ukrainian civilians are being accused, and we do not exclude that they will face criminal so-called charges from the Russian Federation. And here we need an intervention of lawyers, because if we send Ukrainian lawyers, they will not come back. But the Russian lawyers, they can't do that, and they are willing, some of them are willing to help. Besides, next week, there will be a session participated by Petro Lubinets. He is the plenipotentiary of the Ukrainian Parliament in Human Rights, and there will be a human rights session of the United Nations Committee where we will stress on forcing the Russian Federation to respect their international obligations. Secondly, we support the idea that the civil society we have to cooperate with the civil society on the temporarily occupied territories, and the civil society should press the law enforcement there in order to get access to those people and provide humanitarian assistance as well. I would like to address the journalists and inform you that this topic of forced disappearances, it should not be, let's say, downshifted on the agenda. Everybody should remember at all times that it's there. The international community must know that the civilians are most vulnerable against enemy armed forces. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, there is a question from our viewer. Probably it was mentioned, but maybe you could expand on it. Is there any information if there are pregnant women or children under 18 among the captured persons, civilians? I can answer. In our database of the Center for Civil Liberties, we have documented 8 children who were forcefully kidnapped. Luckily, we have some of them released, but we cannot stick to the figure of 8 persons. We're just talking about the cases that we are aware of. State bodies are also working in this problematic. And regarding the vulnerable groups, 6 disabled persons were detained, were captured, including one person who was accused, who was confused as the security service worker. We are now aware of 6 cases, and everyone matters, whether it's an adult, a child, a disabled person, or an elderly person. Regarding children, we cannot claim that children are in captivity, but there are cases of their forced transportation to occupied territories or to the Russian Federation. And in those unrecognized republics, the Ukrainian legislation is not recognized, and in particular parenthood aspects. So those having suffered from bombings and fires, they are left without documents, and in absence of our consular institutions in Russian Federation, they cannot receive documents, and they cannot leave the territory of the Russian Federation, or their movement or their relocation from the Russian Federation is complicated. So there are facts of detaining the children, but we cannot say that we cannot substantiate that they're in captivity. Regarding pregnant women, we don't have this information. We hope that all of them were returned to the free territory of Ukraine. Luckily, we don't have information about pregnant women. Talking about separate categories of Ukrainians held in captivity, there is other group whose rights are violated. These are Ukrainian who lived in Russia, worked for some years, and then something happened. And the Russian courts, for some reason, resolved on their forceful deportation to Ukraine. And for those people, there are
Центр
separate facilities in Russia, centers for temporary detainment of foreign citizens. And these Ukrainian citizens are held there, but they cannot be given over to Ukraine because there are no relations between the countries. And only in the Moscow center, there are 238 citizens of Ukraine. According to the Russian legislation, they can be held there for 2 years, and in fact, it's imprisonment. And there were cases when a person stayed there for 2 years, and when the person is released, it is detained again, and it's a life sentence without court. So these are vulnerable categories. Please ask your questions. I would like to ask a question from our viewers. Can you sum up what are the main barriers? What the main barriers are in terms of releasing the hostages? The main barrier is the position of the Russian Federation that these civilian Ukrainians are prisoners of war. According to the Third Geneva Convention, international humanitarian law, prisoners of war can be kept until the end of war. However, civilians in case of their capture fall under different norms. So they should be released as soon as the military need is exhausted. And this is our case. So the main problem is changing the status of those people. If we manage to do that, we can release several hundreds of Ukrainians. And this statistics is something we work on. It's very hard, but we're going to continue. The last but not least, how do you view the coordination mechanism between the civil society, the institutes of civil society, and the state bodies, and how could you coordinate those efforts? I would prefer that the government representative replies. On the 1st of September, the register of disappeared persons has been finalized. It should be subordinated to the Ministry of Interior. It took some time, but the ministry announced that this process was finalized. There will be a unified database about all Ukrainian citizens who were missing. And this relates both to civilians and prisoners of war. And I addressed the National Police of Ukraine, urging to enter respective data into the system. And the second one is the National Information Bureau under the Ministry of Reintegration of Temporarily Occupied Territories. So these are the two institutions that are in charge of this. So you need. So this is your first entry point. As a representative of the civil society, I would like to add you can see the institutions you can approach in the case when a person is missing or captured. You can address both the Security Service of Ukraine or the National Police, and if we are approached by citizens as well, we advise them on the stages and the entry points where they need to go. And this instruction is openly available on our resources. And regarding the expert council under the plenipotentiary, this is the bridge between the civil society, between the state and the civil society, and this can serve to provide proposals how to solve certain problems. Any other questions, dear friends? Thank you. I'm a journalist of the YouTube channel, and my question is that objectively Russia is a terrorist state, so there are all categories that needed to recognize that it fails all the international norms. Don't you think that you legalize cooperation with state institutions of Russia, legalizing it as a party for certain agreements? So the short answer is no. Our aim is to set our people free and to protect their rights. We are going to pursue it, whoever thinks anything. We're trying to restore contacts with the plenipotentiary on human rights of Russia, Mykhailo, on the matter of control of the freedom and rights of Ukrainian citizens, because humanitarian aspects are above all for a European country. Any other questions? No questions online. So I suggest that we sum up. Thank you for your questions. And would anyone like to add? No additional ideas? So I would like to reiterate that we have our core objective to free our people. We have secondary objective to protect their rights while they're there. We insist that civilian Ukrainians must be released unconditionally because it's under international law. We have allies among international institutions that we should, whom we should involve more actively. We have allies even in Russia, and now we start a new important stage when we have all the information, when we can start acting.